Well, good morning. It is great to see all of you here today. And for those listening, for those watching, welcome to you as well. I pray that all of us can grow closer to God today through His Word and looking at His creation. Specifically today, we're going to look at creation in the sense that we are created, we did not evolve. We are created, we did not evolve. And He created us for purposes built in to that creation by our Creator. God reveals Himself in many ways. We've looked at some of these. He reveals Himself to the world through His Word. Through the written word, or today I didn't bring it up, but through the digital word, like on my phone. He also communicates through creation, like that hay that is made. He also communicates, of course, beginning at the first century AD to the world, to the disciples, to us, through Jesus Christ. Jesus said in John chapter 12, verse 45, He said, "He who sees me sees the one who sent me." And John chapter 14, verses 7 through 9, in those verses He says, "If you had known me, you would have known the Father. For he who knows, or he who has seen me, has seen the Father." So God reveals Himself in different ways. But again, for today, we're going to look at a few items specifically in God's creation that reveals Himself as Creator to humanity. Things that give us some better understanding of our Creator God. So to begin with, I will read today's passage. It is Psalm 19, verses 1 through the first half, or the first 2/3 of verse 4. Psalm 19, 1 through 4a. And this is actually from the English Standard Version today, which is printed by Crossway Bibles out of Wheaton, Illinois. Psalm 19, beginning in verse 1. Actually, the heading is "To the Choir Master, a Psalm of David." The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims His handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words, whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through the whole earth, and their words to the end of the world. In Psalm 97, verse 6, it says it this way: "The heavens declare His righteousness, and all the peoples have seen His glory." So for the rest of this morning, we're going to gaze at a few items within God's creation through the lens of science that gives further testimony to the heavens and stars, but it gives further testimony in science to God's handiwork, to His creation. First of all, I'll mention laminin. If you remember, laminin is that thing that in a drawing looks a little bit like a cross, and it has elements on it. Laminin literally is the glue that holds all cell structures together. And it's interesting that it's drawn in the shape of a cross. Does that prove God? No. Does it prove Jesus? No. But it's interesting because this was said in Colossians chapter 1, verse 17, years before, 2,000 years almost before laminin was known about. Colossians 1:17, speaking of Christ, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. What an interesting verse. Does it prove laminin is Christ? Does laminin prove that Christ exists? No. But for us, it gives testimony. Going beyond that, then, we're going to look at, no pun intended, but we are going to look at the eyeball. We're going to look at the eyeball, and I put these on backwards, so I'll have to do a little back and forth stuff. We're going to look at the eyeball. The eyeball has so many different parts that makes it just utterly amazing. The first parts of the eyeball, of course, exist the eyelids, and has tear ducts. There is a Dr. Borkman that we'll look at here in just a little bit more. He used to be an atheist, but partially because of the eyeball, he believes in Jesus, and he is one of our brothers now today. But he said, without just without the eyelids, our eyes would dry up so quick that they would fail and we would go blind. Just without an eyelid. The next thing we see in the eye is that white part, well, the center, but the white part we call the white of the eyes. It is called the sclera, I believe. And I might butcher a couple of these names here and there. But the sclera is a durable, fibrous tissue that wraps around the eye. It goes clear around the eye except in the front, and it helps to give it its shape and hold it in place. It's for protection, and it wraps around to the optic nerve in the back. On top of the sclera, there is the Bulbour Sheath, and that covers the sclera, and it gives kind of a space in between the eyeball and the tissues around it, and it allows it to move freely. Attached to the eye are 6 muscles. There's 2 muscles that control the up and down, 2 muscles that control back and forth, and 2 muscles control, and you don't think of your eye kind of doing this, but all 6 of those muscles work together so that when we look around, there's no jerking. Everything works in conjunction to move your eye freely. The front of the eye, on the very front, there is the cornea. The cornea is clear. It allows light in. It protects the eye, but it also is dome shape. And the dome shape actually bends light so that it gets into the pupil and the iris. The iris is the colored part of the eye. In the middle of the iris is the pupil. The pupil is where the light enters. The iris itself, whether the room is dark or light, makes the pupil smaller or larger. Between the cornea and the iris, there is a chamber with, it's called aqueous humor, which keeps the constant pressure inside the eyeball. The iris has color to it, and the color actually contributes somewhat to our comfort levels of light. The darker the iris, the more comfort we have with light. Those people with lighter irises have more discomfort with light. And as the light enters the pupil, it hits the lens, and then the cornea and the lens work simultaneously to focus things both near and far. And so when you have cataracts and you have cataract surgery and they remove your natural lens and they put a man-made lens on, the man-made lens cannot do that. They cannot focus both distance and near at the same time. So they pick a distance kind of somewhere in the middle, and that's why we end up after cataract surgery needing sometimes both reading glasses and or driving glasses. Well, as this light bends through the lens, it hits the back of the eye, and the back of the eye includes kind of the whole circle, but that's the retina. The retina is actually about as thin as plastic wrap, and the retina has millions of nerve endings. Millions of nerve endings. I saw one number that said in 1 square millimeter, a millimeter, if you take out your house key or car key, your key is about 2 millimeters thick. So half of that square would contain somewhere around 400,000 nerves. And that is true then throughout the whole retina. The retina has cones and rods. They see different amounts of light. They see different colors. And as the picture comes in, we've heard that it's upside down, but it's also flipped. So it's upside down and flipped. And it goes to the very back center of the eye called the macula. And then the macula actually translates the image to chemical signals that goes through the optic nerve into the brain. And here's an interesting, the right half of each image from each eye goes to the left hemisphere of the brain. The left half of the image goes to the right hemisphere of the brain. The brain somehow puts that back together, flips it over and turns it around, and you can see the bench in front of you. You can read your Bible. You can see the people sitting close. The eye. Did the eyeball evolve? Or did the eyeball get created with a creator with a purpose in mind? Dr. Borkman, as I mentioned earlier, he is actually a researcher at the University of Louisville. He used to be an atheist, but because of the eye, also a wife and a church she dragged him to, has become a Christian throughout his studies. And he says, every day I get to go to work to unlock the mystery of the eye. Another item in our body that is extremely complex. Other than the eye, what would you think would be the next one? Well, one of the most complex systems in our body is swallowing. We do it so regularly, we don't even think about it. Swallowing is one of the most complex systems in our entire system. I am not going to try to name all of the parts. I would butcher it very bad. I'm going to look at just the key issues that happen. It is such a complex system. The first thing with swallowing, of course, is that we have to put food in. We put something in our mouth before we can swallow. That is completely voluntary. But swallowing involves some 50 pairs of muscles. 50 pairs of muscles. And it is skeletal muscles and inner smooth muscles that work together. It also has to work together with the nervous system that tells what these muscles are supposed to do at specific times as we swallow. The nervous system actually completely controls stages 2 and 3. The first stage is oral stage. We put bites in, we chew it. The tongue moves it back and forth. We chop it up with our teeth, make it small enough so that we can swallow. And in that process, we have salivary glands. It brings liquid in to moisten the food so that it's able to be swallowed. And it also has enzymes to help break the food down. As the food is ready to be swallowed, it's formed into something called the bolus. And so I might try to use that rather than just food. The bolus is definitely something that's been chewed and ready to swallow. The tongue begins to make a trough. I don't think about this when I'm chewing food, but the tongue actually begins involuntarily, automatically, to make a trough, to take this bolus to the back of the throat, and to prepare it to swallow. During this next stage, many things happen almost simultaneously. As we prepare to swallow, other things stop. We can no longer chew. If we're coughing, we have to stop coughing in order to swallow. And we actually have a short period of apnea. We stop breathing momentarily in order to swallow. Except I often have trouble with that one. Because somehow as I'm trying to swallow, I'm trying to inhale and trying to talk, and then I end up coughing, and we've all had that occasionally. You end up coughing and half choking. So as the food begins to move to the back of the throat, these things happen. The soft palate goes up, closes off the nasal passageway. The tongue goes up, blocks food from coming forward. The epiglottis goes down and blocks the windpipe. And the pharynx opened up. That's the space in the back of the throat. And this process also opens our auditory tubes, which doesn't help with swallowing, but if you're on an airplane, it's very helpful. As you swallow, it pops our ears open. And then the true vocal folds also close to keep food from going down the windpipe. All of these things happen basically simultaneously, or we choke, we asphyxiate. So the bolus then, the bolus at the back of the tongue is pushed in, goes down. As it goes past all of these things, it goes into the esophagus. The esophagus takes over and begins squeezing. Peristalsis. The muscles move to move the food down. There's an upper sphincter that has to open. There's a lower sphincter that has to open to let the food into the stomach. All of these things are taking place automatically. My mother, the last year of her life, the esophagus didn't do this so well anymore. Towards the bottom, there was a weak spot that just kind of went, and she had more than once, she had a couple times at least, where food got stuck, and twice it was bad enough that she was in the hospital and they had to use one of their fabulous little, not a garden hose, but it's a hose with the light and the camera, and they spray it out. They sprayed it out. They got the food out. So when these things don't work together, it plugs up, or we choke if it goes in the windpipe. an absolutely amazing process. And thinking of all these muscles and nerves that work together automatically after we start the process. Evolution, we're created with a purpose. As the food hits the stomach, of course, everything relaxes and goes back to normal. We start breathing nearly immediately. Evolution, to me, it's evidence of an intelligent creator. We're going to do one more, and I'm going to do this from memory. We were going to have a short video, and so I did not make notes on this. And so I'll hit the highlights on this. We had a little technical issue, and it is from the Truth Project, which was produced by Focus on the Family, and this was 2006. And I had the opportunity of taking part of that back then. And one of the things they covered in the Truth Project was science. And so we're looking at then, specifically today, Charles Darwin, the father of evolution, believed that the cell, the single cell, was more or less a blob. They didn't know what was inside the cell. They didn't know how it functioned. And so making this estimate that the cell just divides, and over a lot of time we come up with all the different systems. With molecular biology today, or shall I say in 2006 already, I'm sure they know more today. What they know about molecular structure is this, and I'll try to give you a description. Inside each cell, a cell is not necessarily round, but inside each cell, there is something called the nucleus. Inside the nucleus houses our DNA, what makes us who we are. Inside the nucleus, where the DNA is, there are numerous mechanisms and machines that work together. So what happens if there is a protein needed in the cell somewhere, the DNA in the nucleus is actually, the DNA, remember, is this helicoil, the picture of the different letters. There's a machine that comes and separates those, and it opens up the chain. There's another mechanism that comes and forms a new chain called the RNS. The RNS, it's a line of command for the proteins in the rest of the cell. It makes this RNS chain. There is a machine that ushers it out of the nucleus. This RNS goes to another machine called the ribosome, and the ribosome manufactures a new chain of protein that is needed in the cell. This process, which was actually shown by computer graphic, is elaborate. Many machines working together, many different functions of a cell. This is all in one single cell. Evolution, or intelligent design by a loving creator. For the cell to function, for that very, if we look at evolution, for that very first cell to function, it had to have all of those components working perfectly together, or it would not have survived. Scientists, however, many scientists do not want to believe in God. They simply do not. Richard Dawkins was a British evolutionary scientist, and he said, according to the Truth Project, he said, biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed with a purpose. Another British molecular biologist by the name of Francis Crick, he was brilliant. He was one of the scientists that discovered DNA in 1953. He died in 2004, but he is quoted again from the Truth Project in 1998 as saying this. He said, biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. They must constantly keep in mind. Why? My question is why? Why would he say that biologists must keep in mind that it wasn't designed, it evolved? He is suggesting daily it was not designed, it evolved. It was not designed, it evolved. Why? Because science today, especially molecular science, points to a creator, points to intelligent design, not something that would just happen. In Romans 1:18, we looked at last week, it says that men suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Even though they know God, they did not honor him, they did not thank him, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Goes on to say, professing to be wise, they became fools. Psalm 53:1 says this, and I don't think this is passing judgment. I don't think this psalm is passing judgment on anybody. I think this psalm is stating a fact. Psalm 53:1. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. But lest we become prideful and point our fingers completely at biologists that refuse to accept God, Psalm 53 is the passage where it says God looks down to see if there is anyone who understands or anyone that seeks him. It said, no, all have turned aside, all are corrupt. No one does good, not even one. When this is quoted in Romans chapter 3, Paul adds, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But let's not suppress the truth. Let's approach it differently. Let's not suppress the truth. Psalm 139:14, we are amazingly, awesomely, wonderfully made. It says, wonderful are your works, O Lord, and my soul knows it very well. Were we made by chance? Not a chance. We were designed with a purpose. Those purposes are varied and many. To work, to worship, to create, to share the gospel, to share that there is a way into the presence of our Father. I'm going to close with words from King David from Psalm 95. Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord, our Maker, for he is our God. As we leave, may we take time this week, that as we chew our lunches and swallow, thinking about all those muscles that move the food to our stomachs, that give nutrition to our bodies, give nutrition to our eyes. As we think about that, may we look through those eyes and be thankful and look at all of the creation that God has made. May we all kneel before the Lord, our Maker. God is our Maker. Amen.